Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending our late afternoon session on colorectal cancer. My name is Andrew Spiegel, and I am the Executive Director of the Global Colon Cancer Association. You'll learn a little bit more about me during my presentation, but I'd like to welcome you and thank you for attending. Today, you will hear from top advocates from around the world in the colon cancer space. You will hear from Barry Stein from Canada, who's going to give you an introduction to what he has done. And I've known Barry for almost 20 years now, and he runs a colon cancer group in Canada. You're going to hear from Zorona, who works for Europa Colon, which is the leading and really the major colon cancer advocacy group in Europe. And then you're going to hear from your very own superstar, Luciana Holtz, who's going to talk about what's happening here in Brazil for colon cancer. And so I'd like to welcome everybody to the first ever Global Colon Cancer Association's Latin America Conference. First, I'd like to thank our conference sponsors, Roche and Pharma and Bio. Without the generosity of those companies, this event would not happen. And so we really appreciate their generosity, both in terms of sponsorship and also in helping with the logistics of getting everything set for today for the two panels that the Global Colon Cancer Association has put on today. So why should you care about colon cancer? Well, in 6 years, over 1.6 million people will be diagnosed with this disease every year. It's the third leading cause of cancer death worldwide, and by 2020, almost 10% of new cases of cancer will be from colon cancer. There's over 600,000 deaths every year from colon cancer, and it's one of the fastest growing cancers in the world. As more countries become westernized and adopt more westernized habits, we see the incidence rates of colon cancer going up in those communities, including Latin America. Incidence is expected to increase by 33.5% in the next 4 years. And the annual economic burden of colon cancer is staggering. It's over $33 billion. Based on some old data, it's probably much more now. So the Colon Cancer Association was started by me and by Zorona's boss, Yola Gore-Booth, who has since retired from the organization. But we started this organization about 5 years ago when I ran the US-based Colon Cancer Alliance. And I've been in the advocacy community since the late 90s when I co-founded the Colon Cancer Alliance, which now is the oldest and the largest national patient advocacy organization in the United States dedicated to colorectal cancer. In addition, I chair the Digestive Disease National Coalition in the United States, which is a Washington-based organization of more than 50 patient and physician groups dedicated to advocating for digestive diseases around the U.S. In addition, we held a forum just before this one on biologics and biosimilar medicines, and I am a co-founder and on the steering committee of the Alliance for Safe Biologic Medicines. And as of last month, I'm proud to say that I am a board member of IAPO, which is the International Alliance of Patient Organizations. Our mission really is to advocate around the globe to make sure that policies that are being instituted for patients, and especially colorectal patients, are patient-centered. We want to make sure that people have increased access to screenings, that communities have increased awareness of the disease, and that people have access to high-quality and effective medical treatments for colorectal cancer. We also support the creation of new colon cancer organizations where they don't exist, and that is the reason that we're starting these conferences first here in Latin America to help build the local patient communities and provide information from other experts from around the world with what has worked. So our goal today is not to tell you how to build a colorectal cancer community and tell you how to do things here in Brazil, but to show you examples of what has worked elsewhere. And so I'm going to show you some examples of what was done in the United States, and Barry's going to show you what has been done in Canada. Zorona's going to show you what's been done in Europe, and Luciana's going to talk about what's happening here in Brazil. You can see that we have almost all of the colon cancer advocacy groups in the world under the umbrella of the Global Colon Cancer Association, and as we advocate for patient-centered policy, it's helpful to have all of these groups behind us combining as one big voice for the colon cancer community. We do extensive advocacy work. We presented hundreds of times around the globe on various healthcare issues. And of course, we're completing our first conferences right here today. I'm not going to go through all of the slides because there's way too much to talk about in only 20 minutes, but suffice it to say that we are very involved in all issues affecting colon cancer patients, whether it be access to colon cancer treatments, access to screenings, access to biologics or biosimilar medications, or even IP protections and trade agreements. So, what I would like to talk about is really what the U.S. experience has been in colon cancer. I got involved in colon cancer when my mom and dad died of 2 different cancers 2 days apart, and I'll tell my story in a moment. But in the United States, before the late 1990s, there were no colon cancer organizations in the United States. Despite the fact that colon cancer was the second leading cause of cancer deaths in the U.S., there were no patient groups, and we're going to talk a little bit about what we did in the U.S. So let's talk about what it was like before the late 90s. It was the second leading cause of death. There was over 150,000 people diagnosed each year, 50,000 deaths per year from the disease. It equated to 1 out of every 20 people would get colon cancer in the U.S. And 15 years ago, there was only one drug for the treatment of colon cancer. It was called 5-FU. It had been around for 30 years, and it was highly ineffective in treating colon cancer. And as a result, your average life expectancy of the metastatic patient was about 9 or 10 months in the U.S. There were no national NGOs, no national screening campaigns or anything of that nature. There was no celebrities talking about colon cancer. There were no support from any industry, retailers, things of that nature for colon cancer. While we all admired all the great work that the breast cancer organizations had done in the United States with pink sneakers and football games and pink everything in the supermarkets, there were no blue for colon cancer back then. Nobody in industry took this disease under their belt. There was very little news coverage about colon cancer and minimal awareness in the primary care settings. Even doctors weren't talking about colon cancer back then. Getting screening colonoscopies was almost impossible. Private insurers routinely denied coverage, and getting colonoscopies was extremely difficult back in the U.S. So why was this? Because this was an embarrassing disease. This was talking about an area of the body that people did not want to talk about. People had fear of screening tests. People had fear of the results of the tests. People had fear of the prep. People felt that this is all in God's hands. We shouldn't mess with God's plan. All of these were well-known barriers to why people didn't get screened for colon cancer, but one of the major barriers was obviously the lack of patient advocacy. When you look at the colon cancer screening rate over the last, say, 12 years, you could see it's been on a constant incline. We went from a rate of about 30%, and we're knocking on the door now of about 70%. And that's a big raise. That's a big rise in the screening rate in a relatively short period of time. And as a result, we see now today the colon cancer death rate is down 50% in the United States, 50% in only 15 years. Pretty unheard of statistics in a major disease like cancer. The screening rate is nearly 70% now, and all screenings are fully covered in the United States. Stage 4 patients are not living 9 or 10 months. They're now living 36 months on average, and many longer. There are numerous patient groups, and there are celebrities that have now embraced the cause. So how did we get there? Well, my story is that I got involved with the Colon Cancer Alliance back in the late 1990s when a group of us founded the organization, and our mission was really to provide patient support, to make people aware of the disease, to advocate for change in policy, and to support research for new treatments. And we launched programs that always focused on the patient. So we launched a toll-free helpline where people were able to call in, and we had professionals manning those helplines that helped people, and there was over 10,000 calls a year when I retired in 2013. We have a really robust online community where you can go on the internet, on the Colon Cancer Alliance webpage, or on social media and interact with thousands and thousands of other colon cancer patients. And that peer-to-peer support has proved to be very valuable to the colon cancer patient. We created a buddy program where we would match, our helpline would match a person with colon cancer to someone who's newly diagnosed with colon cancer. Or if somebody was having an issue post-surgery, we would match them with a buddy who had that same issue. And that was really great to have one-to-one peer-to-peer support for the newly diagnosed. We created materials and distribute those materials to doctors' offices to get people, while they're sitting in the doctor's offices, to read a brochure and have a conversation with their doctor about colon cancer. We created newsletters and all types of other materials. We created a 5K run program that raised a lot of money, millions of dollars in the United States, to help get the word out about colon cancer. And we participated with partnerships with celebrities, names which you may not know here, but if you could get celebrities to advocate for your cause, that generally has a big impact in communities, and we've done that with some success in the United States. We have partnered with industry and specifically partnered with the pharmaceutical industry as well as the retail industry to get consumers to take notice of our products, of their products, which had our name on it, and our branding and our information on it. And of course, there's been a lot of advocacy in the United States for change. The messaging that we used was it's beatable, it's treatable, and it's preventable. And a lot of organizations around the world still use that message. Up to 90% of colon cancers can be avoided through screening and healthy lifestyles, unlike any other major cancer. And through early detection, lives can be saved, and through regular screenings, you can avoid this killer disease. When you go for your mammogram, you're going to detect cancer, or when a man goes for a prostate exam, you're trying to detect cancer. But when you go for colon cancer screening, you have an opportunity to prevent the cancer by getting through to these precancerous polyps and removing them, and you can actually avoid this major cancer through screening. So I talked about a lot of the programs that we put together at the Colon Cancer Alliance, and I would suggest that for time's sake, you go to their website, to www.ccalliance.org, and you learn more about the organization's programs, and you can see all of these different programs that I've talked about and many more that support the patient, the colon cancer patient in the United States. And you can see from all these different programs, we've had a lot of success over the past 15 years. We even had more than 200 local chapters around the country bringing our message to the local level. We declared March as Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month in the United States, and every March there's a lot of activities that start with National Dress in Blue Day, where we ask every American, and this has become viral around the world, but we ask everybody to wear blue for the first Friday in March, which is Colon Cancer Awareness Month, and we give pins and buttons, and that's turned into a very viral campaign. We had Stars Go Blue for colon cancer, where we had the country music industry in the United States do benefit concerts for us. I mentioned the runs and other programs where we try to get awareness of this disease because it's so preventable and it's so treatable if it's caught early that we need more prevention campaigns. So we also developed, as I said, almost 200 chapters and ambassadors around the country, bringing our message from the national office down to the local level. And these hardworking volunteers really did bring the mission to the local level and help elevate the organization from the grassroots level. We have more than 1.5 million people who come to the Colon Cancer Alliance each year for the services that were provided. So what I would suggest to you is that you go to the Colon Cancer Alliance website and you learn more about this organization, and you will be provided with a lot of information about how you can raise awareness down here in Brazil about colon cancer and get people like Carmen Markvalva, who's a very famous fashion designer and a colon cancer survivor, to get behind the cause and to get people to rally behind the cause. These are just some graphics from National Dress in Blue Day, and everybody wears a button that says, "Ask me why I'm blue." That really gets the conversation going. And you can see the undie walk is where people actually go to a 5K run in the boxers that we provide them, underwear. And that really has created a lot of buzz in the United States and gets a lot of media attention because you have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, sometimes thousands of people running these 5K runs in their boxer shorts. And so that's a pretty neat visual. That 5K run now is in more than 27 cities around the United States and growing. And where the money went, it went to support our national organization and all of those programs that I discussed, but we also partnered with local comprehensive cancer centers and other partners, and we left a portion of the money behind, and that was this very successful campaign. The other organization I want to talk about briefly is the National Colorectal Cancer Roundtable. The National NCCRT is a public-private partnership between an NGO in the United States called the American Cancer Society and the CDC, the government body, the Centers for Disease Control. They have had a tremendous amount of effort, put forth a tremendous amount of effort in the United States to get people to screen for colon cancer, including the Screen for Life campaign and things of that nature. And I would suggest at the end of this that you go to their website as well, which is nccrt.org, and you will find all of these tools, these resources, these publications, as well as their new campaign to get the screening rate up to 80% by 2018. And they have thousands of partners who have taken the pledge to get the screening rate up to 80% in the next couple of years. And an 80% screening rate would be unheard of in the world, to get 80% of the population who should be screened for colon cancer to actually get screened. And so you can see the 10 steps that they have put out to achieve 80% by 2018. And it includes everything from high-level work done at the national level, as well as everything done at the grassroots level to help achieve those goals. So you can learn more about 80% by 2018 by going to nccrt.org, 80 by 2018, and you'll have all the graphics and all the downloadables, and you'll see the way they're doing it. So in conclusion, I want to give you some helpful links that I think, from being in the colon cancer community for nearly 20 years, I think if you were looking to build colon cancer communities down here, and not to tell you what you should be doing, but to tell you what has worked elsewhere, you should go to our website, you should go to the Colon Cancer Alliance website, the NCCRT website. Fight Colorectal Cancer is another good quality NGO in the United States. Again, the CDC, Screen for Life, and CRISP for Life, which now merged with the Colon Cancer Alliance, also has good resources. So enough from me about the United States experience. I thank you for listening, but I want to turn things over to other speakers who can tell you about what's happening in their worlds. And the first is Barry Stein. And Barry, I've known for nearly 20 years. He is a graduate of McGill University and has been a member of the Barreau de Quebec since 1981, a fellow attorney, I believe. Barry represents the interests of cancer patients and speaks regularly to medical professionals, industry, government, all types of patient groups across Canada and internationally, covering various aspects of colon cancer prevention and treatment. Barry is the founder and president of Colorectal Cancer Canada, and he has developed award-winning national education and awareness programs, support initiatives for patients and families, and advocacy on their behalf. Barry has been a key advocate for primary prevention screening initiatives, for getting more access to screening, better access to care across Canada, but also with the implementation of provincial colon cancer screening programs, as well as improved access to drugs and treatments for patients. There's much more to talk about Barry, much more to say about Barry, but I'm going to let him do the speaking and tell you what's been working in Canada. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Andrew, and thank you for the invitation to Abrele and from Andrew for inviting me here to speak today. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for your inspiration, really, and all the hard work you've done in the United States, south of our border, north of your border, but south of ours, and really inspiring work that helped us grow our association in Canada. So, I'm going to tell you a few things. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my personal story, and I'm going to also tell you about where we've come with screening in Canada, as well as about our association, the Colorectal Cancer Association of Canada. So as you know, or may not know, colorectal cancer affects many different types of people: large, small, old, young, rich, poor, black, white, men, women, everybody. In 1995, it affected me dramatically. At the beginning of my law career, I had 3 young children, was married, and I really thought everything was just going to go uphill just like that. But at 40 years at that time, I was, as I said, an attorney. I was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer, when nobody knew really what that meant in terms of the general public, and all I received was a tap on the shoulder. But I'd learned very quickly that this was a serious matter, that the cancer had gone to my liver and subsequently to my lungs. So I really had no idea what to do with this, and I was 40 years old. Oh, a pop quiz is how old am I now? See if you calculated that, if you were calculating 40 years old, 1995. Well, we'll get back to that at the end. Actually, I'll be 62 this year. I won't keep you in suspense. So who can forget our first colonoscopy? Anybody had a colonoscopy here in the audience? Anybody? Colonoscopy? Yes? Ah, nice. Oh, we've got the right crowd here today. Great. So we won't be giving you one when you leave tonight. But this is how they do it in Calgary, Alberta. So who can forget about that? And I remember mine very clearly. I had to do it twice because they couldn't believe the results. And then I went bravely for all the diagnostic tests from CT scans, and I was lucky enough to go to the United States to have PET scans as well, because that really didn't exist in Canada at the time. But then there was the physicians. You may have dealt with this yourselves here if you know about a diagnosis of cancer. How were you told? What should your doctor tell you? And what did it mean to you at the time? Nobody likes to say the word cancer. So there I was, a young lawyer, young family, diagnosis of cancer. I had no clue what cancer meant at all. I didn't know what my options were. As Andrew rightfully pointed out, in 1995, there was just 5-FU and leucovorin, actually. And they weren't even sure about leucovorin. They were talking about levamisole. Could this be prevented? Did I do something wrong? What and where could I be treated? Because there were problems. Well, I went into surgery, and as I mentioned before, I found out very quickly that it went to my liver, but I didn't know what that meant. So right when I came out of surgery, I asked my physician, the surgeon, I said, in a joking manner, because I thought in 10 days I would be back at my office, which wasn't exactly what happened. I said, should I stick to the comics in the back of the newspaper, or can I start reading a long novel? Anyways, he said to me, he looked at me straight in the eye, he said, somewhere in between, and he walked out of the room, and I didn't know what hit me. Well, benefits of excellent nursing. In came the fantastic nurse who held me, gave me a cup of tea, and everything was going to be all right, and we cried together because I had no idea what was going to happen with the rest of my life. Well, right after that, I don't have a slide on that, I went to the head of oncology, as all good lawyers would do, and I demanded from the head of oncology, what does this mean? And I said, what's going to happen to me? He said to me, if you can have it removed from your liver, and we don't know that we can, you may live 5 years. And I fainted, literally on the floor. I was flat out on the floor. And I really didn't know what hit me. But when I got up, I realized not only was that the weakest moment of my life, but the strongest moment of my life, because that's when I decided I was going to fight. So I had to start looking at what my options were. And I started learning about new techniques on the internet all around the world. Hepatic arterial infusion, not something that's commonly done everywhere. Liver surgery. Chasing cancer at that time was not as common as it is today. Something called cryosurgery, freezing of the tumors. Now we use radiofrequency ablation. Would there be such a thing as adjuvant therapy? Would we be looking at something as boldly as a cure for colon cancer that had metastasized already? People were quite doubtful, let alone having lung surgery and subsequently removing a rib. Or should I, like one of the government employees told me, perhaps, Mr. Stein, you should just accept your fate, do nothing, and go home and be with your children. That certainly wasn't going to be acceptable. So I was looking around the country and around the world, and particularly in the United States and at home. But as you might relate to, sometimes there's some very long delays for surgery, and people were just lining up to have their surgery done. So I looked at what was going on around the world, and I ended up, after being sent home 3 times from my hospital bed, to New York. to New York Hospital, and I had my liver operated on 4 times, actually, which was really unusual. And then I went to Santa Monica, California, once I had no evidence of disease, for a better part of a year, every 2 weeks, for an experimental vaccine. That was the beginning, I guess, of what you could say is immunotherapy today, or the beginnings of immunotherapy in colon cancer. So numerous types of treatments were used on me which weren't common at the time. Intraoperative ultrasound on the liver to diagnose or to look for tumors before they cut into it. The implanting of a pump in my abdomen to give chemo directly to the liver, and as I mentioned, the vaccine. What I didn't tell you is that in Canada we have Medicare, we have universal health care, and everything should be available for you in Canada. Unfortunately, in a timely manner. Unfortunately, it was not. So I was obliged, as you saw before, to go to the United States for my treatment. And I sued the Quebec government for reimbursement of my health care costs, which at that time were above $250,000. And I had to borrow the money, and I figured, well, if I live, well, I'll find a way to pay it back over the years, and if I don't live, well, I guess I won't have to worry about it. But I lived. And not only did I win the judgment against the RAMQ, or the Régie d'assurance maladie de Québec, and as you may know, Quebec is a French province, or bilingual province, unofficially, officially unilingually French. But more importantly, after all my work for many years, it's been about 12 years since I've had any evidence of disease, so no evidence of disease. So that's all good stuff. And my young children grew up. We now have 3 grandchildren, and a 4th one coming next month, so life is pretty good. But after it all, I started to think, what can we do to prevent this? What can we do to prevent colon cancer? But before I tell you what we thought of, inspired by what Michael did in the United States and others elsewhere, I'll tell you a little bit about colorectal cancer screening in Canada. So what did we do in Canada to attack colorectal cancer? Well, prevention is really the rule of the game. And what we have inspired, I convinced the Minister of Health, the Federal Minister of Health, first to bring in colorectal cancer programmatic screening. So now we have in every province and the 3 territories either plans already going on for fecal occult blood testing or fecal immunochemical testing, or the programs are being brought into place. There's 36 million people only in this big space of Canada, and there's 25,000 people diagnosed every year with the disease, and about 9,300 people die from it. So it is the 2nd biggest cancer killer, like in the United States, and 2nd most likely cause of death for males, and the 3rd most common cause for death for females. So we've looked at some comparisons recently. Some of you may have seen online if you're interested in colon cancer, but the new the Canadian Task Force on Preventative Health, and they have taken a look at the different screening methodologies and concluded that a fecal immunochemical test or fecal occult blood test is the way to go between 50 and 74 years of age. And this is basically what they came down with. However, they also recommended a flex sigmoidoscopy every 10 years. And the big difference between the United States Preventative Task Force is the preponderance of use of first-line screening with colonoscopy in the United States, whereas in Canada, that is not recommended. So average risk people between the ages of 50 to 74, first-line screening is with an occult blood test. If it's positive, it goes on to colonoscopy. So very quickly, we had a review by the Colorectal Cancer National Screening Network, who looked at the population between 50 and 74, and what they found was that population-based screening, or screening in general, and using any means, has gone up from 31% in 2008 to 48% in 2014. I have to say that our statistics gathering in Canada is inadequate because Quebec, for a large part of the time, has not done any gathering of evidence. So, of statistics. Using just a fecal occult test and a sigmoidoscopy and or a colonoscopy, it has gone from 22% in Nunavut to 65% in Manitoba. However, just self-reporting in 7 provinces together, just on fecal occult, we see it's only at 14% with a maximum of 52% in Manitoba. Manitoba is the highest because it was the first program, province to bring in colorectal cancer screening. So when I say it's the entire population when we talk about men and women between 50 and 74 when we talk about programmatic screening. So very quickly about the association in the last 3, I have 5 minutes, fantastic. Just when I need them. So our association, very much like the Colon Cancer Alliance, is based on 3 pillars or principles: awareness and education, awareness for the general public, education both for the patients and for physicians, support for patients and their families, and advocacy on their behalf. Now the advocacy breaks down into 3 areas: the population-based screening, which is quite different from the programs in the United States, because every province has it or will have it. Equal and timely access to effective treatments to bring in, to improve patient outcomes. So this is all about drug access, getting the right drugs to the right people at the right time. And of course, primary prevention. And you'll see a program that we started. On our awareness, some of our programs are very similar to that in the United States. Our March Awareness Month, it's no coincidence. Dress in Blue we've started as well in Canada. But we have a little, can you put on the video of our one of our awareness? Is anybody in the back there? There we go. This is a little treat. This is an introduction to what a polar bear looks like in Canada. So I hope you all realize that's not really what a polar bear looks like in Canada. And if you didn't read it, didn't get it the first time, go to endangeredbutts.ca and you'll see what it does look like. So I have to say there's a number of Brazilian connections that we have. Dr. Angelita Habergama introduced us to the first Brazilian giant colon and Dr. Preventino. So Luciana, meet Dr. Preventino in the middle. Who goes, and we have video inside our 40-foot long giant colons that travel throughout the country. And our very big thanks to Abrapresi, who helped with our first giant colon tour and inspired us. So with over 117 visits across a very large territory of Canada, we've had over 500,000 people go through our giant colon so far. And it is a very big attention getter. March, as I said, is our awareness month with Dress in Blue days. Kramer, my dog, attends them all. You can see he's a very good volunteer. And we've created a number of infographics to help explain the cause. Different awareness campaigns. In December, like our friends in the UK, we do Decembeard, not Novembeard, Decembeard. And we've had different campaigns which have been very successful in the back of buses. Very inspiring. Different campaigns, tabletop displays, websites, all social media from Twitter to Instagram, basically all social media we're utilizing. Some of our support group meetings, we train cancer coaches, so we train people in peer-to-peer support in order to help other patients, much like the buddy system, except we give them a little bit more of a formal education over a 3-day period. Advocacy is very important to us. That really leads to bringing in the screening programs, or has led to bringing in the screening programs throughout the country, as well as access to drugs. You mentioned about the different drugs that were available, Andrew, before at the very beginning in 1995, 5-FU. Well, we have a whole buffet of new drugs which are available. Unfortunately, you can see the ones next to the last ones, aflibercept or sorafenib, TAS-102, ramucirumab. These drugs are actually not available in Canada. They are not approved for reimbursement for various reasons. And this is a challenge when we see that they are in the toolbox south of our border. And I'm sure that in Brazil you could relate to these problems. Drugs which are developed and are out there, which might be life-saving, might help prolong life, are not necessarily available. And we see a tsunami of new drugs coming with the immuno-oncology drugs. And that is probably going to be our biggest overall problem. And in addition to that, a whole bunch of new surgical techniques. To provide our input in Canada, we have a system where patient groups can actually give their input on approval for new drugs. So we started a project, an international project on patient values and their input into health technology assessment. And we're working to better define what patient values are, to measure them, put values on them, and then to advocate that they should form a specific part of the expert committee decision on reimbursement of drugs. So if you could imagine that we could put a value on what you as patient values on a scale of 8 to 10, for example, and argue that 25% of that decision would be based on that objective value rather than just the subjective opinion of who's sitting around the table to decide whether or not a drug should be reimbursed. This is a poster from the University of Calgary where this was presented, where our PhD students is working on this. And we have another Brazilian connection because as part of our international patient groups who are working on this project, Luciana is here today. Circled her. Can't recognize her from there, but you can recognize her from here. So thanks to Luciana. So another Brazilian connection. The other connection I forgot to tell you is that our polar bear, the creative person, is from Brazil. So a little bit of interest there. Here is another program that we have on healthy foods, and it's actually an app that you can download at Get Enough app, where we participate with the dairy farmers of Canada in choosing the appropriate portions of food to eat, healthy lifestyles in accordance with the Canada Food Guide. And finally, another just quick slides, a new program on foods that fight cancer. Go to that website. It's very interesting. Some of our other new campaigns today on subsequent entry biologics, on Never Too Young for young patients with colon cancer, and access to oral therapies in Canada. Today is Metastatic Colorectal Cancer Awareness Day, newly declared, and we have patient groups from around the world who are participating in this new campaign so that patients will know that they have metastatic colorectal cancers. Patients will know that they should have access to some of the new biomarkers, anti-EGFRs, so KRAS and RAS testing, NRAS testing, in order to plan their therapies. And finally, just some of our other alliances, both in Quebec, throughout Canada, internationally, and hope to be add the global coalition logo shortly. And then just a whole bunch of events that we do across the country. And thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much for sharing not only your great work in Canada, but your personal story, which really makes this whole conversation personal. And I'm glad I don't have to follow you. But we do have a great speaker to follow you, who is Zorona. Zorona is from Europe, and imagine what we're dealing with in the U.S. and what Barry's dealing with in Canada. Imagine having to deal with how many countries in Europe? 50? 50 countries. Well, things that worked elsewhere may not work the same in Europe, and so Europa Colon has been around for some time, and Zorona is going to tell you about the work that she and the organization have done. Zorona holds the position of Director and Group on Project Development at Europa Colon at her position. She is responsible for coordination and support of Europa Colon's affiliate and associate programs that she's going to tell you about, as well as establishing the relationship with new groups in order to continue the network growth of the organization. When she came to Europa Colon in May of 2012, there were 21 organizations within the network. And currently, there's over 43 organizations that make up Europa Colon. So obviously, Zorona's been working quite hard over the last few years. She also manages some of the projects that Europa Colon is undertaking. Zorona, in addition to the hard work that she's been doing at Europa Colon, she's not only an employee, she's now a board member. And by education, she just received her MBA in health management at the University of Sheffield. So congratulations on that, while working and being a mom and wife. So don't worry, you're going to get outdone by Luciana when she speaks. So I turn things over to Zorona from Europa Colon, and thank you.
Thank you, Andy, for this lovely introduction. Thank you for inviting me to be here. Thank you all for coming here. Europa Colon is umbrella organization overarching more than 40 European organizations, and as Andy mentioned, it is quite difficult sometimes because of 50 different countries across Europe, 50 different mentalities, all with different problems. And I will try to give you a brief introduction on what Europa Colon does, what are some of the achievements, but also what some of our groups do. I will not go into details because Andy mentioned something on the epidemiology, but we all do know that colorectal cancer is a great burden to our health systems. And as you can see on this slide, it is the disease of more developed regions. And the highest mortality rates are in the part of Europe where I'm coming from, Central and Eastern Europe. And it is definitely because of the poor access to diagnosis, treatment, and care. And already, as we are speaking today on this 27th of December, 168,000 people in Europe have died already this year of colon cancer. And you cannot see in the journals the headlines, and this is a terrible statistics, and we have to do something about it. So we do know, as Andy mentioned in his presentation, that colorectal cancer is treatable if diagnosed early. I will not go into details, but it is preventable. You can remove polyp and you can remove the disease. And if detected early enough, the survival chances are great. But if you detect it in stage 3 and 4, the survival chances are much lower. And today we do know that major cause is poor diet combined with low physical activity. But the good thing is that risk can be reduced by changing and decreasing the meat consumption and increasing the intake of vegetables and fruits. And luckily, especially in Europe, I don't know about Brazil, but there is a lot of these headlines in the newspaper. So people are getting aware that food is important, that we can prevent some diseases by changing our habits. So for that reason, because we passionately believe that things need to change, in 2004, Europa Colon was established. It is still the only umbrella organization in Europe. The mission of the organization is to prevent deaths from colorectal cancer, to improve the quality of life and provide support for those that are affected by the disease. And the key objectives of the organization are to raise profile of colorectal cancer in Europe among the media, the general public, and the policymakers, to strengthen patient advocacy and to enlarge the colorectal cancer community, and these are our 43 groups that we have. So this is Europa Colon. We are a small team of 5 of us in the headquarters. We have expert patient advisory group comprising of 8 patients, and we have more than 40 groups across 30 countries. As of 2015, we are supporting other patients with digestive cancers because we have recognized that in Europe they are not being supported. And this is the photo from one of the meetings that we have. Every year we have a gathering of all our groups. We have recognized that it is very beneficial that we meet in one place and in order to share the experiences and learn from each other. And this is from one of the meetings. We really became like a big colorectal cancer family. Beside hard work, we do have fun on those meetings. And these are the countries that we have representation, but still in the Nordic countries, there is a lot of work for me to do. As of 2008, we have launched March as European Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month, same as in the US. In the UK, this is April. And this is from one of the campaign from the last year. The focus was on screening. And one of the memes that was most viewed in social media was this one, keep calm and get screened for colorectal cancer. We also hosted 2 colorectal cancer patient conferences, one in 2011 and the other one in 2013. What we have learned by hosting these 2 conferences was that it is much better to organize the conferences locally where patients could hear about others' experience and other interesting topics in their own language. So we are not organizing these conferences anymore, but rather our groups are organizing them. And this year, our Portuguese organization held their first big conference for all digestive cancers. Then in 2013, as I said, our expert patient advisory board was formed. It comprises of 8 colorectal cancer survivors. 2 of them are survivors of metastatic colorectal cancer for more than 8 years. One of them received close to 100 cycles of chemotherapy and biologic therapy, and I have never heard of another example like this one. So we really do believe that they are experts of the disease because they have been there. And they have produced this material that you see in the blue box, and it's all available on our website for download. It's at europacolon.com. And also we do work a lot. Our director of policy does a lot of policy work. In 2012, we have produced the white paper. It is available for download on the website. And then in 2013 and 2015, we have produced the barometer, first colorectal cancer health check barometer, where we have tried to put in one place what is the situation with diagnostic treatment and care across Europe. We updated the document last year, and unfortunately, what we learned was that the situation has not changed much. We also do support our groups locally, but also our director of policy is very active at the EU level. And every day, together with our groups, we work to promote national formal population screening programs, encourage the improvement of standards and equity of care throughout Europe, and later on I will show you the status of screening across Europe. And these are now the examples of some of the work undertook by our groups. I'm especially proud of our Portuguese groups. They were the first organization that we have established 10 years ago, and they really fought really strong for screening. They had very strong awareness campaign, tried to explain to the general public what is the burden of colorectal cancer, how it can be prevented, and also they spoke on a regular basis with their health ministries, with their MPs. They do have a schools program, which is they educate the schools in children that are from the age of 11 to 13 on what is healthy eating. And they have also worked with the biggest chain of pharmacies to introduce and promote fecal occult blood tests. And because of their hard work, this year, during their conference in July, the government announced that they will start with formal population screening program. And I think that this was the prize that they really deserved. This is the example of the colorectal cancer awareness campaign. As I said, Europe is 50 countries, very different countries. In Latvia, for example, where they did this campaign with mimes, you have to understand that people don't want to talk about cancer. They don't want to know about cancer. So what our group tried to do with that campaign to show them that although you don't want to speak about it, and although you don't want to hear about it, the cancer is there, so you cannot ignore it. And it was a very good campaign that they did in March, but also throughout the year of 2015. This is the Israeli campaign. They do screening with colonoscopy, and they are very active in promoting the screening with a lot of material. As you can see, sometimes it's very controversial. But you can also see the red line is the number of colonoscopies done per year. And you can see that for the last 5 years, since they have started doing their campaign, that it is increasing. They're really doing fabulous jobs. Sometimes it's on the border. Some people like it, some people don't like it, but it shows success. This is the campaign from my home country, from Serbia. It's don't make excuses. You do know that we all tend to make excuses when it comes to our health. You know, I will do this today, tomorrow. I will go see a doctor later. And this little cartoon says, don't make excuses. You know, it's important to do it now. This is the example from our Hungarian group. They were in a huge problem in November 2012. Their government decided to cut the budget for their colorectal cancer drugs because, according to them, it brings only marginal benefits. And the society didn't just sit and wait to see what's going to happen. They have organized. They held press conferences together with their leading oncologists. They had meetings with the Ministry of Health, with MPs. They organized numerous press releases. And because of the media pressure they have created, the government decided that they cannot do it. Then many of our groups have patient support clubs, different way of patient support. Slovakia is very good in this one. They have patient support clubs in all major oncology institutes. These are the volunteers that undergo special training, and also they do have physicians that counsel with the patients. And also they can get additional information through the phone calls or the web page. This activity is very interesting for me. I have just learned about that one a couple of months ago. It's from France. This is about adapted physical activity. I guess that you do know that physical activity reduces the rate of relapse. And that was recognized in France, and because of good connections that they have with their French league, but also because of the fact that in France, even in the very small cities, you have small tennis clubs. They had coaches that are experts in adapted physical activity, teach the tennis coaches how to train the patients, but any type of patients. These are not just cancer patients. And in France, this type of activity is officially recognized as a form of treatment that the patient can prescribe. The tricky part now is, and that's what they are trying to solve right now, is that the organization is distributing coupons for the patients so they can attend a couple of free sessions. In some regions, these sessions are completely being covered by the authorities. In some, the authorities are covering the first year, it depends. But also, some private insurers have shown interest to cover this type of treatment. And also, they are now enlarging this. This is going not just to be in tennis, but also adapted physical activity in soccer, swimming, and other type of sports. This is our organization from UK. They are very well developed. They are kind of in the US. It's a different mentality. In UK, these organizations are very professional. You have to understand that some of those examples, for example, Latvia is 2 volunteers, and that's it. The UK is really professional organization with doing an amazing job, and they are very active in the field of research. They have raised a lot of money for the research. It is expected for their report in critical gaps in bowel cancer to be published in a couple of months. Also, they are doing the research in understanding bowel cancer in young people, and then some other type of projects. And my question is whether, 12 years down the line, where are we? Are we there yet? With the primary prevention, thanks to this gentleman, who is very active in primary prevention and food education in Europe, we are not going into that field. We are supporting in some countries some activities, but things are being changed. With the secondary prevention screening, you can see that there is a lot of gray across Europe, and these are the countries when there is no screening. Also, the orange countries are not good as well because there is opportunistic screening. So there is a lot of work for us to do. And even in the countries when there is green, when there is formal population screening program, sometimes the compliance rates are very low. So we can only dream about 80%, but we can work to get those 80%. Another burning problem in Europe is that we do not want physicians to choose whom to treat. We want them that they are able to treat all the patients. So we do advocate for equal access to treatment and care, and we have a lot of work to do in this field. So my conclusion would be that we do know the road, we are going in the good direction, but there is still a lot of work ahead of us. And with this, I would like to conclude and thank you all for your attention. It was a pleasure for me to be here. Thank you. Obrigada.
Well, thank you for that great presentation, Zorona. Another job I'm glad I don't have. That's quite a burden you have. I believe the last I heard, colon cancer, the population of Europe makes up about 11% of the world and about 30% of the cases of colon cancer. I believe that's what I read, so I know you have a big problem ahead of you, but it's good to see that road. Well, last, but certainly not least, is your superstar patient advocate, Luciana Holtz. And Luciana won't let me say a lot about her, so I'm going to say very little other than she is the founder and the CEO of Oncología Institute. She probably has done more from the patient advocate's perspective in Brazil than anybody else in the entire country. I think that goes without saying. And everybody seems to know Luciana in Brazil. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time introducing her. I'm just going to hand you over to your patient advocate superstar.
Sorry, my friends, but now I'm going to speak Portuguese. Oi, gente, boa tarde. Que bom que vocês estão aqui, né? Porque a gente não queria ficar tão desapontado assim. A gente sabe que realmente o desafio do câncer coloretal no Brasil é grande, mas que bom que vocês estão aqui, né? Para a gente conseguir discutir um pouquinho e aproveitar, né, a visita desses grandes amigos, né, que estão fazendo a diferença mundo afora. Acho que a gente tem muito que aprender, tem muito para trocar. E vamos aproveitar, né? Realmente, eu vou contar um pouquinho, então, para vocês. Como é aqui, Andrew? Só aqui? Ah, ok. Vou contar um pouquinho, então, para vocês de que forma que o Oncología tem trabalhado, né, o desafio do câncer coloretal no Brasil. Né, para quem não conhece o Onco é uma organização sem fins lucrativos que tem a missão de ajudar o paciente com câncer a viver melhor, seguindo, né, 4 diferentes frentes. Então, apoiando o paciente, educando profissionais de saúde, informando com qualidade e fazendo o nosso trabalho de advocacy, né, para que a gente consiga, sim, ter uma melhor política pública de câncer no Brasil. A gente tem hoje o desafio, né? Acho que a gente já viu bastante os números, né, do Canadá, da Europa, do Andrew, mas acho que a gente tem que não pode esquecer, né, que hoje o Brasil tem, então, 17 mil casos de câncer coloretal na mulher, e a gente não pode esquecer, gente, que assim é o segundo mais incidente. A gente fala tanto de câncer de mama, e quando que a gente escuta falar, né, de câncer coloretal? E o terceiro mais comum nos homens. Então, a gente tem, sim, que fazer mais barulho, a gente tem que olhar com mais atenção para o câncer coloretal. E acho que o recado principal que eles deram aqui, né, ele é totalmente prevenível. Né? Acho que a gente tem uma mensagem que é muito importante. Aí, né, a gente tem essa historinha, né, que a Maria, que entrou em contato com a gente com 49 anos, e ela conta, né, que, então, em 2009, ela começou a sentir muitas dores abdominais, que ela foi primeiro ao ginecologista, achando que fosse alguma inflamação. Ela fez exames e não acusou nada. Ela continuava a sentir dores e começou a sentir, né, começou a perceber um sangramento pelas fezes. Foi, então, que ela voltou ao médico, explicou o que estava acontecendo, e aí, então, o médico orientou que ela passasse com gastro. Ela marcou a consulta, fez uma colonoscopia, e ela veio a notícia, né? Ela estava com câncer no intestino, e aí ela fala, pareceu rápido? Não, isso não foi rápido. Né? Entre as dores e o diagnóstico, tudo isso aconteceu, né, durante mais de 10 meses. Então, a gente tem, sim, esse enorme desafio no Brasil, né, de conseguir fazer com que as coisas aconteçam de forma mais rápida, mais ágil e de forma mais prioritária mesmo. Né? O que a gente percebe, né, eu acho que o Barry também mostrou super bem, é o quanto, né, desse momento da prevenção, onde falar de sinais e sintomas de adoção de hábitos de vida saudáveis, da importância da realização dos exames, é tão importante. E esse paciente que vive com o diagnóstico do câncer coloretal, do câncer de intestino, ele entra num labirinto e ele fica completamente perdido. A gente está falando do desafio da gente entender sinais e sintomas que nem sempre são, né, são possíveis. Qual é o médico? Né? A gente vê, às vezes, o paciente rodando de médico em médico, vai primeiro para um clínico, vai para o gastro, ele não chega, né, às vezes, realmente, num prócto que olha para ele e que faz um diagnóstico correto, que pensa que pode ser câncer de intestino. Né? Parece que esse é o pensamento que não vem. Né? O desafio da colonoscopia, né, eu acho que, sim, tenho medo da colonoscopia, tenho medo do exame, o preparo é chato, mas a gente sabe que, às vezes, assim, é um exame, até mesmo o exame por si só, é bastante desconhecido na nossa população. Onde que eu vou fazer o tratamento? Né? É cirurgia? Tem né, todo o preconceito com relação à bolsinha de colonoscopia, bolsinha de colostomia. Né? Então, tem muita coisa para a gente administrar e tornar esses caminhos mais claros. Né? Acho que quanto mais transparência a gente tiver nesse processo, mais as coisas caminham e mais diagnóstico precoce a gente faz, mais vidas a gente salva. A gente trabalha muito sempre fazendo a jornada do paciente com câncer, e essa é uma jornada que a gente fez ouvindo pacientes de câncer coloretal. E, bom, é gigante o mundo de informações realmente que a gente levantou nesse painel, mas alguns pontos realmente se destacam, né, gente? Eu acho que, de novo, nenhuma novidade, mas o que a gente ouviu muito, né, na etapa da prevenção é a falta da informação. Então, a gente tem, sim, que falar muito, ainda conscientizar muito, a gente tem que aprender muito com o Outubro Rosa, né, e fazer muito barulho também com câncer coloretal. Então, a falta de informação sobre prevenção, sobre sinais e sintomas. Olha a pergunta dos pacientes, né? O desafio de saber quem é o médico, mas quem é, afinal, o médico que trata o câncer de intestino? Qual é o exame correto? E aí a gente, né, começa também a entrar num desafio, porque a gente não tem os programas de rastreamento disponíveis no Brasil. A questão do tempo, né? Então, os pacientes levando muito tempo entre o diagnóstico, o surgimento, às vezes, de perceber que tem alguma coisa no próprio exame da colonoscopia e começar efetivamente o tratamento. Então, isso sempre é um desafio muito grande. E um comentário muito importante dos pacientes falando o quanto o tratamento por si só também é muito pesado. Né? Às vezes, a cirurgia, depois tem que fazer quimio e rádio junto, ou então, às vezes, a quimio e rádio antes. Né? O quanto tudo isso é um momento bastante difícil que precisa ser enfrentado, e o quanto ele precisa também de informação, de apoio, né, de dicas de qualidade de vida para enfrentar esse momento do tratamento também. Aí, a outra historinha da dona Ana, né, que também, com 53 anos, sentiu, né, percebeu dores abdominais, intestino preso, perdendo peso, procurou o posto mais perto da sua casa. E aí o relato dela, né, que ela nunca tinha ouvido falar nem de colonoscopia e que também ela não sabia que existia câncer no intestino. Né? Chegando lá no posto, né, o desafio da gente, vocês sabem que, né, o caminho de quem precisa do SUS, a primeira porta de entrada é a UBS, é o posto de saúde. Então, no posto, quando ela chegou, não tinha médico. Daí ela demorou mais de 40 dias para conseguir passar com o médico. O médico não examinou, mas deu um vermífugo para ela. Dona Ana continuou com sintomas e com dor. Ela estava com dor, né? Ela voltou ao médico 3 meses depois, e dessa vez um novo médico ouviu suas queixas, né, desconfiou e pediu uma colonoscopia. Ela aguardou uma fila de 6 meses para fazer o exame, para conseguir fazer a colono. E, quando realmente veio o resultado, ela já se tratava de um câncer de colo retal com metástase no fígado. E hoje ela está em tratamento no SUS, o que, infelizmente, a gente sabe que ela não tem acesso ao melhor tratamento, o tratamento mais adequado para o caso dela, né, nesse caso, com a metástase já no fígado. Se a dona Ana, se a dona Maria tivessem acesso, né, à informação sobre o câncer de intestino e aos exames preventivos, principalmente ao sangue oculto e à colonoscopia, se elas tivessem acesso, né, à informação que sedentarismo e obesidade têm relação com câncer de intestino, né, se elas tivessem acesso que aos 50 anos, primeiro ela faz o sangue oculto nas fezes, e se ele é alterado, né, com um prazo aí de 1 mês, ela pudesse fazer uma colonoscopia, e se tem sintomas, a colonoscopia tem que acontecer rápido, né, em 1 mês. A gente fez aqui uma proposta, mas, claro, as coisas precisam acontecer de forma rápida. Tudo isso talvez fosse muito diferente. Né? Bom, o que diz o Ministério da Saúde sobre o câncer coloretal? A gente fez uma pergunta, né, o que a gente sabe? O que a gente sabe é que, oficialmente, realmente não existe um programa de rastreamento de colo retal, né, do mesmo jeito que existem os programas de mamografia, de colo de útero, para colo retal não existe. E a resposta específica que o Oncoguia recebeu do governo, né, do Ministério da Saúde, foi, então, que, nesse momento, não existem ações específicas para o câncer coloretal, e sim, né, ao câncer. E, no que tange à prevenção, o que existe é o estímulo para a adoção de hábitos de vida saudáveis, que isso a gente realmente percebe, sabe que acontece, né, mas um olhar mais cuidadoso e realmente mais prioritário para o câncer coloretal não existe. Além disso, existem os PCDTs, né, que são os protocolos clínicos e diretrizes clínicas que o governo publica, que são os livrinhos lá, um livro onde o governo escreve quais são os protocolos, quais são os tratamentos que podem ser oferecidos no SUS. Ele foi publicado em setembro de 2014, já com ressalvas, já com algumas considerações, inclusive, das sociedades médicas, com relação aos tratamentos que estão disponíveis no PCDT. O Oncoguia já organizou 2 audiências públicas no Senado para discutir o tema. Né? Em uma delas, os pontos debatidos, e acho que são pontos chaves mesmo, acho que são pontos prioritários e que a gente precisa mergulhar e ver como trabalhar com isso. Mas, claro, os dados de custo-efetividade foram levantados, dos testes. Né? Então, como é que a gente mostra qual é o teste mais custo-efetivo? Isso a gente sabe que existem os dados internacionais, mas a gente não tem o dado brasileiro, e eles pedem para que o dado seja o dado brasileiro. A questão da falta de infraestrutura, existe, sim, uma grande preocupação por parte do governo, né, que se a gente começa a fazer um programa de rastreamento, a gente pode não estar preparado, né, com máquinas suficientes para fazer as colonoscopias, para fazer as cirurgias, e a gente sabe que não está, né, mas temos que olhar para isso. E, com relação, né, à nossa pressão, né, de se criar um programa de rastreamento, também toda uma discussão, assim, qual que tem que ser o melhor exame, qual é o intervalo, né, tudo isso foi levantado pelas pessoas do governo, e a gente também questionou muito como é que a gente prioriza pessoas que já apresentam sinais e sintomas. Como é que a gente poderia, pelo menos, então, pensar em alguma forma de priorização. Além disso, a gente fez junto, né, com a Abrapress, que a Rede está aqui, com a Kátia do Naspec, e a gente fez realmente uma reunião multi-stakeholders para discutir, né, quais seriam os principais problemas e de que forma que esses problemas poderiam ser priorizados e trabalhados. E nesse documento, então, que foi gerado nessa reunião, eu vou passar rapidinho para vocês quais foram os pontos que foram mais levantados e também priorizados. Então, com relação à prevenção, a falta de programas educativos sobre alimentação e atividade física nas escolas, além da ausência de programas de conscientização sobre um estilo de vida saudável. Então, está aí, né? O básico a gente não está fazendo direito. Então, o quanto as pessoas comentaram que a gente precisa cada vez mais e mais e mais falar de hábitos de vida saudável, estimular as pessoas, falar hoje, né, do combate ao sedentarismo, falar do combate à obesidade, o quanto a gente precisa fazer, sim, muito barulho com isso. Com relação ao diagnóstico, claro que já existia uma preocupação com relação à falta de colonoscópicos para garantir os exames tempestivos. A própria capacidade de infraestrutura também foi levantada como pontos que a gente precisa olhar, a carência de equipamentos e também de profissionais, especialmente os patologistas, a baixa remuneração para os procedimentos para diagnóstico, aí a gente tem aqui esse modelo de APAC, né, que então a gente também precisa olhar um pouco para isso, e a ausência de políticas públicas até estaduais ou regionais que a gente consiga criar modelos de rastreamento populacional. Com relação ao tratamento, claro, a gente precisa, né, ter mais equipes e trabalhos multidisciplinares. Os médicos comentaram muito sobre a questão mesmo até de falta de leitos para UTI, falta de equipes e falta de equipamentos. Na parte de cirurgia, a questão dos grampeadores também foi mencionada, e de profissionais capacitados para usá-los. A gente sabe hoje que a gente tem uma tabela do SUS defasada, que precisa ser atualizada, onde os valores, né, não são, com os valores disponíveis, não dá para oferecer o que tem de melhor para o paciente, aí a gente entra numa outra seara da incorporação dos novos tratamentos, até mesmo dos pagamentos dos testes, né? A gente também tem a medicina personalizada no câncer colorretal, que precisa ser olhado. Os três falaram aqui das campanhas, né, da campanha Get Tested e de outras opções aí que são tão importantes e que podem fazer a diferença para o paciente. Com relação aos pacientes que convivem com a doença, a gente também tem o desafio das bolsinhas de colostomia, até mesmo da falta de enfermeiras capacitadas para orientar e oferecer um apoio correto para esses pacientes ostomizados, a própria cirurgia de reversão da colostomia, o que nem sempre acontece, de novo, pela falta de infraestrutura, a orientação mesmo e treinamento dos pacientes, né, que vão ter que assumir, de repente, algum espaço aí, caso a gente precise falar de cuidados paliativos. Então, os 2 pontos de tudo isso, né, a gente ainda fez força para o grupo para priorizar, e o que ficou de 2 pontos centrais, então, ficou a questão mesmo de conscientizar a população sobre a doença, fatores de risco e sinais e sintomas, como prioridade número 1, e a 2, realmente a gente promover, né, o acesso à prevenção e ao diagnóstico precoce, pensando, então, na criação de programas de rastreamento. O que eu acho que a gente tem que, né, não esquecer é que é primordial mesmo. Acho que a gente está batalhando muito, tem diferentes grupos fazendo isso, mas a gente precisa chamar a atenção do governo e precisa fazer com que ele olhe, né, de forma mais prioritária para o câncer de colo retal. A gente sabe que as barreiras são inúmeras, e eu acho que a gente tem aí o melhor argumento do mundo, né, que a gente pode, no câncer colo retal, salvar vidas fazendo prevenção. Então, acho que é esse o nosso principal ponto, e eu deixo aqui o meu muito obrigada.
Well, thank you, Luciana. Another job I don't want. Luciana has her work cut out for you, but Brazil is very lucky to have her and other advocates who can continue to fight. You could see that the issues are exactly the same. It's with everything that Luciana described, it sounds exactly like the United States was only 15 years ago, and exactly like Canada was, and even Europe in some places. So I think there's hope, and I wish Luciana and her organization much luck in continuing the great work. So before I conclude, I want to open up to the audience if there's any questions for these panelists. Does anybody have any questions from the audience? It's hard for me to see, so you're going to have to wave your hand pretty hard if you do. No? Luciana has questions.
Tá funcionando. Então, eu vou ajudar aqui nas perguntinhas. A gente recebeu 2. Bom, é para a mesa. Eles estão perguntando que existem vários estudos já relacionando a presença do vírus HPV com o câncer coloretal. Um jovem hoje, de 18 anos, infectado pelo HPV, pode desenvolver câncer de colo retal? Quais são as hipóteses desse câncer aparecer em jovens? Tem a relação? Is there a connection between HPV and colorectal cancer?
Yeah, I've not heard about a connection between HPV and colorectal cancer. Maybe the other panelists have. I've only heard about the connection between that and, I think, cervical cancer. But I will say, I'll take the opportunity to say that we have seen a dramatic increase in younger people around the world being diagnosed with colorectal cancer. In the United States, over the last maybe decade to 12 years, there's been an average increase in the incident rates of colon cancer for people under the age of 50, growing 4% per year by the last decade, and rectal cancer 10% per year over the last decade. And so there's a dramatic increase, not only in the United States, but around the world, in younger people, people under the age of 50 being diagnosed with colorectal cancer. And so imagine fighting and advocating for that group of folks when we're still fighting for the 50-plus generation to get screened. So there's big problems coming in colorectal cancer in the next few decades, but I haven't heard of the connection. Zorona?
Add something to that, yes. I have mentioned Bowel Cancer UK. They are very active in doing the research on finding the reason behind the increase in colorectal cancer in young adults. But also there is a great campaign for young adults and colorectal cancer, Never Too Young. It was also started by Bowel Cancer UK, and CCA and your organization are also members of that campaign. So yes, there are probably many reasons, but I have never heard about HPV and colorectal cancer.
Eu também não, gente. Acho que a relação... Então, a próxima pergunta, tá falando que é para mim, mas eu, de verdade, quero compartilhar com a mesa. Então, eles estão falando que a colonoscopia é muito importante no diagnóstico do câncer coloretal. Além da falta de acesso, como que a gente poderia trabalhar para diminuir o estigma negativo do próprio exame, da colonoscopia e do seu preparo. Deu para entender?
The preparation?
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the United States, when you look at barriers to colon cancer screening, I mentioned some of them in my presentation, but they're pretty well known and well documented around the world that people don't want to talk about colorectal cancer. They don't want to talk about that part of their body. It's very much like in the 1950s and 60s with breast cancer, when people would not talk about that part of the body. Communities have to be able to talk about colon cancer at the dinner table, just like every other organ of the body. The colon is just another organ in the body, and people have to get comfortable talking about it. And I think the way it's really happened is through celebrities talking about it and through people, just your everyday people, wearing a little pin that says, "Ask me why I'm blue," or wearing one of our blue wristbands, which everybody's welcome to take lots of, so I don't have to carry them all back to the US. But it's just people talking about colon cancer, getting more people comfortable talking about it, and talking to your healthcare providers about it, and saying to them, it is appropriate for me to start talking about colon cancer screening. And I would start talking at a young age. I would start talking in my 30s and 40s about a plan for colon cancer screening in my lifetime. And so it's important to be educated about the disease and to use campaigns like you've seen from all of the presenters to get people talking about this disease. And once you break down that barrier where people become comfortable talking about it, everything else seems to go into place, because once the conversation starts, there's a lot to talk about. Barriers, Arona?
Yeah, I just wanted to maybe address more specifically the question of the preparation or side effects of a colonoscopy. So first of all, it's important to understand that the person who receives a colonoscopy, it should be the appropriate person at the appropriate time. What we found in Canada was very often the wrong people were getting colonoscopies, and they were getting them too often. So in terms of the side effects or bad things, if you will, about colonoscopy, it's the preparation that is really the hardest. It's actually easier now than ever before. The taste of and having to drink a lot of fluid prior to the colonoscopy was an issue, but there are much better tasting products out there now. And in fact, there's even a pill in some cases that could be used. But it's also, the actual colonoscopy itself is fantastic because they give you excellent drugs which will sedate you, and really you hardly feel anything at all from the colonoscopy itself. So when people complain about a colonoscopy, it's usually the preparation for it. That being said, the colonoscopy does carry some risk of puncturing the colon. And that's why it's generally not used in Canada as the first-line screening. And that's why it's important to understand there are many first-line screenings to do first with fecal occult guaiac test or fecal immunochemical test, which is what we use now, before doing a colonoscopy. So there's no way of getting around inserting the tube to this day into the colon in order to remove a polyp, but we have in some cases used what we call virtual colonoscopy, which is a CT scan which can see if there's a polyp. But at the end of the day, in order to remove the polyp, you would still have to do a colonoscopy. So we have all these new preparations which can make the preparation a little bit easier than it used to be. But that, if you will, is the hard part, emptying the bowels. The colonoscopy itself is virtually painless with these for 90% or 99% of the people because of the great sedatives that you receive. I get my best sleeps, actually, preparing for with the colonoscopy. And there are other techniques that can be used prior to the colonoscopy, virtual colonoscopy, FIT, FOBT.
Right. And I think Barry makes a really good point that in America, colonoscopy is all that's really discussed. And it's not really fair because there's 30% of the population that's probably refusing to get a colonoscopy, and they will not get a colonoscopy no matter what you say or what you do. And so there's many other tests out there, and I think that's really what Brazil should be focusing on for the next few years, is getting the test the patient will get done. And that's not That's not my term. That was Sidney Winnower from Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York, who said the best colon cancer screening test is the one the patient will do. So if you don't want to get a colonoscopy, there's plenty of other screening tests that are far less invasive, far less costly, and that work. And Zorona, that is pretty much true in Europe, isn't it? The general screening is not colonoscopy. You want to say a few words about that?
Yeah, majority of countries are doing immunochemical screening, as there is not enough of gastroenterologists to perform colonoscopies.
Yeah.
So, qual é a probabilidade? They want to know about I'm going to speak English. They want to know about the probability if a polypus turns a cancer.
Is the question, if there's a polyp, does that mean there's cancer?
What is the probability to
90% of polyps don't turn into cancers. I believe that's the statistic that I last heard. It was 90% of polyps are benign. So when the doctor does a colonoscopy and removes the polyp, don't think you have cancer because they found some polyps. 90% of the time, they're not cancer. But it's hard to know which ones will turn into cancer, which ones will not turn into cancer, which ones will be benign for the rest of your life, which one may have just grown and will be very aggressive and turn into cancer in a few years. Generally, it takes 10 to 15 years for a polyp to turn into a tumor. So you have a large window of opportunity to get screened and to remove that polyp, if necessary, and never develop colon cancer. So there really is a large window of opportunity to remove that. It's just a matter of getting to the healthcare provider, getting coverage for it in your country, and getting the test done. Right? Anyone else have any comments on that?
Oh, I would certainly echo what you said, and the most important part is to get screened starting at least at the age of 50, because that's when the risk increases. There are a very small percentage of the population, which included me, below the age of 50, but nevertheless a not insignificant and growing number of patients under the age of 50 who will develop colon cancer. I have to say that we use a little bit of a lesser number, not 10 to 15 years. We use 8 to 10 years, simply because we're more afraid that a polyp will be missed, and so 10 to 15 years. But the US guidelines suggest that if you do have a colonoscopy, you don't need another one for 10 years. Yeah. So, that indicates that really there is a very strong consensus that it takes at least 10 years is a safe number before a polyp can turn into cancer, since if you do a colonoscopy once and it's clean, and it's a good colonoscopy, then you can do it 10 years later.
Mais perguntas? Comentários?
I think we can guarantee a colonoscopy for those that haven't had one as they leave the room.
Yeah. No more questions?
Colonoscopia para todo mundo. I have a question. I really would like to. Eu queria ouvir eu vou falar em português. Eu queria ouvir de vocês, né, a experiência de vocês.
Wait a second.
Tá bom.
Okay.
Queria ouvir de vocês quais são os conselhos, as sugestões que vocês poderiam nos dar, considerando esse ponto que a gente que o Ministério da Saúde questiona com relação ao custo-efetividade dos exames, né? Que eles alegam que para a tomada de decisão a gente precisa ter esses dados de custo-efetividade. Queria saber se vocês passaram por isso, quais foram os diferentes passos que vocês deram para conseguir discutir isso.
Yeah. So I think Brazil's healthcare system is much more like Canada. And so I'm going to punt that one to Barry after I make a couple of comments. But I think in the United States, the data showed that for every $1 spent on screening, $3 in treatment costs was saved. So for every dollar the government or a private insurer or an employer invested in colon cancer screening, they save $3 in treatment costs because, again, 5% of the population gets colon cancer. So 5% of every workforce, 5% of every insurance company's policyholders will get colon cancer, and those folks have figured out that it makes sense to invest in screening, or they wouldn't have. Private insurers, public insurers, private employers, and throughout the world, health ministers have learned that investing now in colon cancer screening saves a lot of money down the road. And that data that shows that is old data. Today, your average cancer patient can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars in treatment costs. So compare hundreds of thousands of dollars to 5% of the population versus a very small amount for screening. So I think that you have to pull that data somehow in Brazil to show this is what the cost of screening is, and if you don't screen, this is the number of people that will continue to get colon cancer, and this is what that will cost, not only cost in medical bills, medical expenses, lost productivity, lost time from work, all the training that goes into bringing an employee up to speed, and then that employee's sick. So the economic burden of a metastatic colon cancer patient or even an earlier stage colon cancer patient is tremendous on a health system. And there's nowhere that I've ever seen any data in any country that showed that colon cancer screening was not cost effective. So I think that's the case you have to make, but I'm going to give that to Barry next.
Right. So I think it's absolutely correct, and I think actually Zorana would also be able to echo the similar sentiments, that it is absolutely clear that it's cost effective. In fact, the initial data, I believe, came out of the Netherlands first on fecal immunochemical testing, and out of England as well, out of the UK, which clearly demonstrated the cost effectiveness of fecal occult blood tests originally, and now even more so with fecal immunochemical testing, FIT tests. But as Andrew has mentioned, it becomes even more cost effective because of the new and great but expensive drugs which patients have access to, particularly in the metastatic setting. But there is a very huge cost that is never calculated, which makes it even more cost effective. And that's the societal cost, the loss of productivity, the cost of families, the burden of cancer costs. And these are very rarely calculated and very difficult to calculate, and therefore health economists rarely do so. But that just adds to the argument for doing it. Generally speaking, I think governments are convinced on the cost effectiveness of doing the test. And they have two factors which they look at. They look at what age should we start it, because that has a certain cost for the programmatic approach to it. They have to buy the computer systems, they have to do the follow-up with the patient and so forth. And the second thing that they look at is the cost of, or the ability to provide a colonoscopy following a positive FIT test in a timely manner. So the cost of the test is not so expensive, really. It is really the computer system and the personnel to do the follow-up, but most importantly, having the resources to follow up with those positive cases, because there are a certain percentage which are false positives, which are really just mistakes, so to speak. They're not really just blood in the stool for other reasons. And that really sort of clogs up the system a little bit. So what they've done in various countries in order to push the implementation of programs is they raise the age of the people where they start the program. So in the UK, I think they started at 60 years old rather than 50 years old for economic reasons. And the second interesting thing that they play around with is the positivity bar. So there's certain acceptable limits for positive fecal occult blood tests or fecal immunochemical tests, and they raise the bar a little bit, and so you have less positives. So these are some of the arguments that can be used. I believe that all governments can easily be convinced on the cost effectiveness of the test, of the program. It's a question of the implementation of the program and the resources available to follow up pathology, surgery, colonoscopy, and so forth. So this is something that has to plan. It's not unique to Brazil. The province of Quebec was one of the first provinces that we convinced, and they did all the research themselves, to bring in the screening program. But because of a lack of resources in terms of colonoscopy in a timely manner, because you don't want to give people a positive fit test and not follow up within 8 weeks with a colonoscopy, they've delayed the implementation of the program in some of the provinces. So we feel the pain. We know exactly what you're going through.
I would just like to continue on what Barry said. You know, in some countries like Malta, the screening is being done in the population from 60 to 65. So they have started with really small population with the idea to lower that limit. And also, as Barry said, with immunochemical testing, you can adjust the cutoff value. And maybe start with the pilot programs or in 1 or 2 regions, so you have local data, and I'm sure that the government will be convinced then.
Oh, just a quick comment, because you reminded me when you said pilot programs. That's how we initially started in Canada, starting with a pilot project actually in Ontario. But I don't like the word pilot project, because pilot project means that if the pilot doesn't work out, you may not have a program. In Quebec, they adopted a great terminology. It said, projet de démonstration, demonstration project. So we're demonstrating that it works, and we're doing the program, rather than a pilot to decide if we're doing the program.
And that is actually how it started in the U.S. as well. The CDC launched a colorectal cancer campaign with 22 states and 4 Native American tribes, and it was through that program, once they saw after 3 years that was very successful, that they expanded it to all the states and all the Native American tribes in that thing. So any other questions before we wrap this up? No. Okay, well, first, I want to thank all of you for attending, and thank our great speakers, Barry Stein, Zorona, and your local superstar, Luciana, who is single-handedly, I think, going to raise the bar of colon cancer in Brazil. And you will see when we come back here year after year, you're going to see the data she's going to present is going to show that all the stakeholder meetings that they're having and all of the beginning steps will lead to increased access to colon cancer screenings. I hope everybody enjoyed today's presentations. I hope you learned a few takeaways from what has worked elsewhere, and maybe some of those ideas can be incorporated into your community. And we wish you the best of luck, and thank you very much.